Hello. So here we are at a vernal pool. I've walked up to this small, mucky body of water from my house. I recalled this vernal pool, and I was hoping to see some activity from some amphibians, and indeed there is activity here. So I'm excited to show you what's going on. Vernal pools are extremely important, and unfortunately, through the modern time, because they are kind of they're ephemeral or seasonal wetlands, and they happen to fall in these glacial depressions. They're one of the first things that'll be taken out by a bulldozer in development, what have you. And although right now it seems like it's really tranquil and peaceful, in the evening this place is absolutely alive with life, with all kinds of salamanders and frogs and toads. And this is kind of this seasonal meeting ground for them. So what happens is, as the snow melts, obviously some of it evaporates, and some of it remains as surface water, and that surface water comes down into these glacial depressions, and in some of these depressions there is either a very impervious clay substrate beneath the water, or perhaps some pretty impervious or non-porous bedrock that allows for water to stand. And this water remains pretty cold, and has lots of leaf litter and things like that in it. That makes excellent habitat for all kinds of different amphibians, frogs, and other and other types of animals, such as macroinvertebrates or insect larvae. And so what makes this really prime habitat for amphibians is because this water actually will evaporate or dry up as we move forward into the summer. And therefore, there are no fish that live here, and that makes it a safe place for these amphibians to lay their eggs. Because if they only laid their eggs in areas where there are fish, and actually they do that as well, there would be significant losses to the number of eggs that were fertilized and later turn into amphibians. So basically, you must understand that amphibians, frogs, toads, and salamanders, etc., make up a huge part of the biomass index within our forest. In fact, it's one of the largest biomass aspects in our forest. So this means that they contribute massively to the food chain, to the nitrogen chain, to decomposition, to the exchange of gases, etc. And if you have a healthy forest, you can bet your buttons that you're also going to have a healthy population of amphibians. And again, with sprawl and increased development, habitat for amphibians has become increasingly compromised. So I'm going to tell you a lot more about why these amphibians matter, and also where you can find them, some unique aspects to them. And while there are there's just untold numbers of ecological attributes that can be afforded, or that can be that we can thank amphibians for, it's also the reality that these guys are heavy predators of insect larvae, like mosquitoes, etc. And so without amphibians, we would continually not be in as hospitable of a world. But so in this vernal pool right here, I can count at least 2, but I think 3 different types of eggs. So I'll just start with this one right here. I'll just pull it right out of the water. Water's pretty chilly. I'll bring that right up. We can see there's kind of these greenish eggs that are surrounded by this gelatinous blob. And if I look through, I can actually see the eggs that are inside this blob. So this really tells me this is a salamander egg that laid this, and it's also free floating. It's not anchored onto a branch like some of these other eggs are. So again, the salamander eggs, you can see the individual eggs, but they're covered by this gelatinous blob, which is different than, say, this egg mass. Pull out lots of eggs here. That was actually anchored to a tree branch. And in this case, it's all just a whole bunch of individual eggs, and there's no gelatinous blob around them, which tells me that these are frog eggs, most likely wood frogs. So that's here we've got yellow-spotted salamanders and then wood frogs. So I can actually kind of like almost take, I'll try to do it, one egg. There we go, one egg out from that mass. Whereas with this one, I really can't without cutting open the actual protective mass. And yes, that's exactly what that is. It's a protective mass that aids in its survival rates. Sometimes you'll just see a string of eggs, just one singular string. That's a toad. I'm going to reach out here and see if I can grab this other egg, which might be a third type of eggs that we have here. Yeah, indeed it is. This is another salamander, potentially a Jefferson salamander here. And again, I can see that I can see the individual eggs, but it's covered by this gelatinous mass. So there's a handout that I gave you that's going to help you look at that, which will be pretty interesting for you to be able to decide what you're looking at when you go out and find your own eggs. And here, actually, we also have this greenish tint here, and that's essentially algae that's trapped inside this gelatinous mass, and that algae is converting sunlight, and it's actually allowing for oxygen for these individual eggs inside here. So it's almost like a solar panel, if you will. Some other neat things about these salamanders is that they can regenerate. In other words, if you take a tail gets taken off by a predator, it'll grow back. So will eyeballs, so will jaws, so on and so forth. They go through this incredible metamorphosis, which there are different life stages. For example, the red eft, which is the little newt that everybody sees, the red newt that everybody sees on the trails in Hawk Hill. The red eft has an aquatic phase and a terrestrial phase, meaning a land phase and a phase where it actually lives in the water. And it can change that depending on drought conditions. So if there's lots of water around, they'll be aquatic, and if it's dry, they'll go back to that terrestrial phase. See, they're extremely, their skin is amazing. They breathe through their skin, so literally many of them in different life stages don't have gills, so they actually breathe through their skin in the water, but they become very sensitive to pollutants, and so they are harbingers of information of the quality of the ecosystem that they happen to be found in, and we can find a lot of data from them. They also release toxins from their skin, which makes some of them poisonous to humans or other potential predators. They sweat toxins out of their skin. Some of them can actually enter into basically a metabolic icebox where they freeze themselves pretty much solid, but barely keep enough glucose inside their internal organs to maintain the very, very most basic of life functions, allowing them to survive extremely cold temperatures. As you know, when you listen to the peepers, their songs are just incredibly loud, much louder than you'd think for an animal about that big. But really, again, just to recap, we have in this vernal pool here deep in the forest, we have yellow spotted salamander eggs. We can tell partially because of the greenish tint, the algae that is actually blooming in there and allowing for oxygen for the embryos, and also the gelatinous mass that covers each individual egg. Here we have what I'm pretty sure are wood frog eggs, where we see that there is no gelatinous mass covering the eggs. And then we had another form of salamander eggs, and there might be some more. So yeah, again, real quiet here. I wish you were here with me, but at nighttime, this place is absolutely humming with activity. There's mating and egg laying going on, and I really hope that you can get out, find your own vernal pool, recognize its positive attributes, and perhaps ID a few of the egg masses that you find there. Take care.